Uzor and the Rich Man by Esther Stories and Folktales. Once upon a time, a young man in his early 20s lived in the small village of Umuaka. His name was Uzor. Uzor's father, Mr. Obi, was a poor farmer who toiled day and night in the fields, growing vegetables to feed his family. Uzor was the only son and often found himself burdened by the weight of their poverty. He would watch other young men in the village leave for the city, returning with stories of success, wealth, and a better life. The dreams of escaping poverty haunted him, and his restlessness grew by the day. One chilly morning, unable to bear the thought of another day in the fields, Uzor made a decision. He would leave for the city, seek fortune, and return to lift his family out of poverty. He rose before dawn, packed a small bag, and left the house quietly, not wanting to face his father's disapproving gaze. He walked along the dusty road leading out of the village, his mind filled with visions of what lay ahead. As he walked, deep in thought, Uzor failed to notice the luxurious car speeding towards him. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. The car hit him and everything went black. 2 days later, Uzor woke up in a hospital bed, his body aching and his head throbbing. As he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was his father, Mr. Obi, sitting by his side, his face etched with worry. "Uzor, my son," Mr. Obi said softly, relief flooding his voice. "Thank the heavens you are awake." "Father, where am I?" Uzor whispered, his voice weak. "You are in the hospital, my son. You were hit by a car on the road," Mr. Obi explained. "The man who hit you brought you here and paid for your treatment. He is a wealthy man, Uzor, and he wants to help you." At that moment, a tall, well-dressed man entered the room. His name was Mr. Godwin, the owner of the car that hit Uzor. He approached Uzor's bed with a kind smile. "I'm glad to see you are awake, Uzor," Mr. Godwin said. "I'm sorry for what happened, but I want to make things right. I see potentials in you, and I want to help you out of this difficult situation." Uzor, who was still groggy and confused, could hardly believe his ears. Here was a wealthy man offering to change his life. It felt like a dream. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Godwin and Uzor grew close. Mr. Godwin saw Uzor's determination and decided to invest in him. He gave Uzor a loan, advising him to use it wisely and promising to guide him in his new venture. Uzor, eager to prove himself, accepted the loan, set out to start a business. For a time, it seemed like Uzor's life was finally turning around. He invested in a small trading business, selling goods in the village and nearby towns. But as time went on, the business began to falter. A series of poor decisions coupled with bad luck led to significant losses. Within months, Uzor found himself drowning in debt, unable to repay Mr. Godwin. Shame and fear consumed Uzor. He started avoiding Mr. Godwin, unable to face the man who had shown him such kindness. The weight of his failure pressed down on him, and he began to withdraw from the people around him. One afternoon, while Uzor was lost in thought, Mr. Godwin's men found him on the road and brought him to Mr. Godwin's house. Uzor was filled with dread as he entered the grand home, knowing he would have to explain his failure. Mr. Godwin was seated in his study when Uzor was brought in. He looked up as Uzor entered, his face serious but not unkind. Uzor immediately fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Please forgive me. Please forgive me, sir, Uzor begged. I've lost all the money. The business failed and I have nothing left. I am so sorry. Uzor began to beg. Mr. Godwin studied Uzor for a long moment before speaking. Uzor, I trusted you with that money because I believed in you. But more importantly, I wanted to help you. We all make mistakes and sometimes things don't go as planned. Uzor looked up, his eyes filled with hope. Does that mean you will forgive me? He asked Mr. Godwin. Mr. Godwin sighed, then nodded. Yes, Uzor, I forgive you. I will write off your debt, but I want you to learn from this experience. I will give you a small sum to start over, but this time, I want you to be wiser. Remember, success isn't just about money. It's about how you handle failure. Mr. Godwin told him. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Uzor thanked Mr. Godwin profusely. Thank you, sir. I promise I won't disappoint you again. When Uzor returned home that evening, his sister Ugoma met him at the door. Her face lit with excitement. Uzor, guess who is back? She exclaimed. Who? Uzor asked, puzzled by her enthusiasm. Emeka, Ugoma replied. Your old friend, the one who left the village years back, is back, Ugoma said excitedly. Uzor's heart skipped a beat. Emeka was a friend who had once been his business partner. They had started a venture together, but when it was time to share the profits, Emeka had vanished, taking Uzor's share with him. The betrayer had left Uzor bitter, and hearing Emeka's name now stirred up old anger. I need to find him, Uzor muttered, his voice cold. Uzor spent the next few days searching for Emeka, asking around the village until he finally tracked him down. He found Emeka on a narrow bush path, looking haggard and worn. Emeka, Uzor called out, his voice laced with fury. He grabbed Emeka by the collar, his anger boiling over. Where is my money? Emeka looked at Uzor, fear and regret in his eyes. Uzor, please listen to me, Emeka pleaded. I never meant to run away with your money. After I left to bring the profits to you, I was kidnapped by some men who took me far from the village. I only just escaped and made my way back. I have nothing left, Emeka explained. But Uzor's anger was too great. So you expect me to believe that? You must return my money, he shouted, dragging Emeka to the village police station, despite Emeka's desperate pleas and the villagers' attempts to intervene. Word of Uzor's actions soon reached Mr. Godwin. When he heard how Uzor had treated his old friend, he was deeply disappointed. He sent for Uzor to come to his house immediately. When Uzor arrived, Mr. Godwin was waiting for him, his expression stern. Uzor, is it true that you had your friend arrested over some old debts? Mr. Godwin asked Uzor. Yes, sir, Uzor replied, still fuming. He stole my money. I had every right to have him punished, Uzor replied Mr. Godwin. Mr. Godwin shook his head, his voice heavy with disapproval. Uzor, when you were in debt and had nothing left, I forgave you. I gave you another chance because I believed everyone deserves one. And now, you refuse to do the same for someone else. What kind of man does that make you? Mr. Godwin asked Uzor, chastising him. Uzor felt a pang of guilt, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. But sir, he wronged me. He stole from me, Uzor defended himself. And I could have said the same thing about you, Mr. Godwin replied sharply. But I chose forgiveness. I chose to help you, even after you failed, Uzor. If you can't show the same compassion, then perhaps you don't deserve the forgiveness I gave you. Mr. Godwin replied him in anger. With that, Mr. Godwin ordered his men to take Uzor to the police station and have him locked up. Until you repay the kindness you owe, you will remain there, Mr. Godwin declared. Let this be a lesson in humility and forgiveness. Days passed as Uzor sat in the cold damp cell. He had plenty of time to reflect on his actions and the choices that led him there. The more he thought, the more he realized the truth in Mr. Godwin's words. He had let his anger and pride blind him, and now he was paying the price. One day, Mr. Godwin visited him in the cell. Uzor, have you learned your lesson? He asked, his voice gentle but firm. Uzor nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. Yes, sir. I have been foolish. I let my pride and anger control me. I should have forgiven Emeka, just as you forgave me. Please, sir, give me another chance to make things right. Uzor pleaded with Mr. Godwin. Mr. Godwin looked at Uzor for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, I will release you, but I want you to go and apologize to Emeka. Make peace with him and learn to let go of your grudges. Only then will you truly be free. Uzor was happy and was elated, and he went to amend his wrongs. This is the end of the story of Uzor and the witch.